It is 4 in the morning somewhere in northern Wisconsin right now. The temperature outside is 29 degrees Fahrenheit. The strawberry rows that were pushing out their first green fruit of the season are gone. The tomato transplants that somebody spent 2 weekends carefully hardening off on their porch before setting into the ground during last week's warm afternoon. Frozen through, cell walls ruptured, plant tissue destroyed at the molecular level. Done. The corn that emerged into promising rows just over a week ago, some of it is not coming back. And the worst part is that is not even the most concerning thing about what I am about to tell you. Because here is how bad this frost will actually be. And I need you to understand the full picture before I give you the specific forecast numbers, because the numbers only make sense when you understand what came before them. Today we need to have an honest ground-level conversation about what this spring's relentless frost and freeze pattern has actually done to the people, farms, and communities sitting across the northern tier of this country. Because a lot of the coverage around frost events talks about them in abstract terms. Frost advisory, freeze warning. Temperatures in the upper 20s, those words start to blur together after a while. So today I want to make it concrete. I want to tell you exactly what is happening, exactly who is taking damage, and exactly how bad this actually is when you get close enough to see it clearly. Before we talk about what is happening right now, you need to understand the full context of this spring. What we are dealing with today did not start today. This has been one of the most relentlessly cold and frost-riddled spring seasons the northern United States has seen in years. And I want to walk you through the timeline so you understand this is not one isolated event. This is a pattern that has been compounding damage week after week after week. It started in mid-April. Senior meteorologists documented what they called a sharp temperature plunge that sent readings from summer-like warmth to early spring chill across the upper Midwest and Northeast within 24 to 48 hours. 2 consecutive very cold mornings were specifically flagged, the kind of back-to-back freeze events that are significantly more damaging than a single cold night because plants never get a chance to recover between them. That freezing event extended from the eastern Dakotas and northeast Nebraska all the way across western and central New York and into northwestern New England. Then before anyone could fully recover, cold air came back at the end of April. NWS offices across Michigan issued frost warnings with temperatures projected to dip into the 30s. In parts of northern lower and eastern upper Michigan, the NWS Gaylord office was simultaneously dealing with lingering high water from flooding on top of repeated nighttime freezes, flooded fields during the day, frost-killing temperatures at night. Farmers in some of those communities were fighting 2 crises at once. Then May arrived and the pattern did not break. It accelerated. By early May, the after effects of a disrupted polar vortex were still being felt, with temperature departures running 5 to 15 degrees below normal over multiple days. The groundwork was being laid for what forecasters called the chilliest first half of May in decades for the central and eastern United States. A freeze watch was issued for parts of Michigan by May 5th. Agricultural meteorologists were specifically flagging the 7th and 8th of May as the most likely days for widespread frost formation, as far south as the central. Plains and Midwest. International Falls, Minnesota, was dropping to the mid-20s Thursday night, then ranging from the upper 20s to near 30 degrees from Friday through Sunday nights. And then around mid-May, frost advisories came back again. The NWS issued freeze warnings and frost advisories across much of Minnesota and western Wisconsin. The Twin Cities area was included in a frost advisory. Parts of central Minnesota and western Wisconsin were under a full freeze warning. The Grand Forks NWS office was flagging temperatures in the low to mid-30s, resulting in frost formation across portions of north-central, northwest, and west-central Minnesota and northeast and southeast North Dakota. So when I tell you this frost problem is bad, I'm not talking about one cold night that surprised people. I'm talking about a spring-long pattern of repeated compounding cold events that have hit the northern tier of this country again and again and again with no adequate recovery window between them. The damage has been accumulating with every single event, and it is not done accumulating yet. Let me explain something a lot of people do not fully understand because it makes the damage numbers make sense. When temperature drops below 32 degrees, water in plant cells freezes. And when water freezes, it expands, puncturing cell walls from the inside. The cell ruptures, the tissue is destroyed, there is no recovery from that. A plant cell ruptured by ice is dead and no warming afterward brings it back. Research from North Dakota State University Extension confirms that how damaging a frost event is depends on 4 things: crop type, stage of plant development, duration of freezing temperatures, and environmental factors like humidity and soil moisture. Wet soils buffer the cold because moist soil holds and radiates heat upward through the night. A gradual temperature drop allows slight acclimation, but a fast, hard drop under clear skies with light winds, which is exactly what this spring has delivered repeatedly, gives plants no buffer at all. The upper Midwest grain belt across Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, and South Dakota has been covered by freeze warnings and frost advisories repeatedly throughout May. For a region planting corn and soybeans into ground already stressed by recurrent cold and saturated conditions, every additional frost event delays planting, sets back emerged plants, and adds financial pressure to operations already running on thin margins. The Wisconsin and Minnesota market garden and specialty crop regions are in particularly difficult shape. University of Wisconsin Extension documented as recently as mid-May that soil temperatures in many areas of northern Wisconsin remain in the mid-Tausend to upper 40s, still too cold for warm season crops. For pumpkins and squash, growers are told to wait until soil temperatures reach at least 60 degrees. For melons, 70 degrees is ideal. The combination of cold soils and continued frost risk is pushing planting dates back weeks from where growers need to be, compressing the growing season on the back end and putting enormous pressure on every remaining frost-free day to count. Upstate New York, the Finger Lakes, and into New England. Hard freeze conditions extended into far northwestern Pennsylvania, western and central New York, and northwestern New England during the April events, and those same regions have been hit again through May. The wine grape industry in the Finger Lakes, the apple industry across western New York, and the maple syrup and specialty crop operations across Vermont and New Hampshire have all taken repeated hits from this pattern. These are not industries with large financial cushions, and a bad frost year in the Finger Lakes is the difference between a viable harvest and a year where some operations do not break even. I want to identify 3 specific factors that turned what would have been a difficult spring into a genuinely damaging one. Factor 1, the warm setup in late March and early April pulled plants dangerously far forward. Before the cold pattern locked in, there was a stretch of warmth well above normal for the region. That warmth triggered early bud break, early flowering, and early vegetative growth in everything from fruit trees to row crops to garden transplants. Plants were running 2 to 3 weeks ahead of their normal developmental schedule when the cold pattern descended. So instead of hitting dormant or barely emerged plants, the frosts hit plants that were already far into their spring growth, maximizing the damage potential of every cold event that followed. Factor 2, the pattern delivered repeated events with incomplete recovery periods in between. This is the compounding effect that makes this spring fundamentally different. From a single bad frost year, a single hard frost is damaging. A hard frost, followed by a few cold days, followed by another hard frost, followed by more cold, followed by another frost, is a completely different level of damage. Each event hits plants that are already stressed from the last one. Plants that survived the first event borderline might not survive the second. Plants that survived the second might be finished by the third. That is what this spring has delivered. Not one frost problem, but a season-long sequence of them, with each wave finding weaker and weaker plants waiting for it. Factor 3, this cold pattern hit during the spring predictability barrier. The spring atmospheric pattern has been extremely difficult to lock down because of the persistent buckled jet stream funneling Canadian air south repeatedly. When the late frost risk extends beyond the historically expected window, growers and gardeners who planted on schedule get caught. That is exactly what has happened over and over this spring. Now here's where this goes from history to current forecast. The frost threat has not permanently ended for the upper tier of the country. The polar vortex disruption that set up this entire cold pattern has not fully resolved. Another large dip in the jet stream is expected to develop near Hudson Bay, sending additional waves of cool to chilly air into the Midwest and Northeast. Northern Minnesota, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, the Dakotas, and northern Wisconsin have climatological last frost dates running from late April through early to mid-May. We are past those dates. That does not mean frost is impossible. It means it is less expected. And in a spring where the jet stream has been persistently buckled, being past the average last frost date provides less protection than normal. Here is your practical action list, and I want to be specific because protect your plants is not actually helpful without detail. If you have tender transplants in the ground, tomatoes, peppers, squash, cucumbers, basil, keep your frost cloth or row covers accessible and deployable right now. Keep them somewhere you can grab them in 10 minutes, because this pattern can produce frost threats with short notice windows. Watch your specific county forecast, not just the regional headline. The difference between a frost advisory and a freeze warning is the difference between a rough night and a devastating one. A frost advisory means temperatures between 33 and 36 degrees, damaging to sensitive plants but survivable with protection. A freeze warning means temperatures at or below 32 degrees for multiple hours. That is crop-killing territory for anything warm season. Pay attention to the low spot problem. Official forecast temperatures are typically measured at 6 feet above open ground at a weather station. If your garden or field is in a low-lying area, a valley, a river bottom, or any slight depression in the terrain, you can easily be 4 to 6 degrees colder than the official forecast. A forecast of 34 degrees in your area can mean 28 degrees in your low-lying field. That margin matters enormously, and it catches people who were watching the forecast but not accounting for their specific terrain. For larger operations, monitor soil moisture going into cold nights. North Dakota State. University research confirms that wet soils buffer overnight cold better than dry soils because the moisture holds and slowly releases heat. If you're heading into a potential frost night on dry ground, a good watering the afternoon before can make a measurable difference in what survives. And check on the elderly people in your circle. Late season cold snaps catch people off guard because nobody expects to need heat in late May. Older people living alone in homes where the furnace has been turned off are genuinely vulnerable. Overnight lows in the upper 20s in a poorly insulated home with no working heat is a real health risk. Check on people. It costs nothing. The calendar says late May. The atmosphere has not consistently read that calendar this spring, and there is no strong signal yet that it is about to start. Keep your frost cloth out, keep your alerts on, and do not let your guard down until the pattern finally and fully shifts. We will be watching it with you.